She told me, "You chose comfort, I chose to give life," right before demanding I sign over my home to prove I loved her kids. Opening, the math she did without me. I have 1 apartment. My sister has 2 children. In her equation, that math was already settled before she sat me down with wine and a practiced speech. The children needed space. I had space. The children needed stability. I had stability. The children deserved a home. I had a home. Therefore, by the iron logic of maternal sacrifice, my apartment should become her apartment, and whatever happened to me afterward was a secondary concern, a rounding error in her moral calculations. I want to tell you about my niece first, because she matters in all of this, and I don't want you to lose her in the noise of everything else. She is 8 years old. She draws pictures of everything she loves, dogs she doesn't own, places she's never been, people who matter to her. Last spring she drew a portrait of me eating ice cream and taped it to my refrigerator the last time she visited. She drew my hair wrong. I have dark hair and she colored it orange, apparently because she thought it was funnier, and she laughed for 10 minutes every time she looked at it. I left it on the refrigerator for 3 weeks. My nephew is 5. He is at the age where everything is a question. Why is the sky blue? Why do dogs have 4 legs? Why don't you have a dog? Why don't you have kids? Why do you live here by yourself? The last time I babysat them both, he fell asleep on my couch with his shoes still on, and I carried him to my bed and sat in the doorway for a moment just thinking about how lucky I was to be their uncle, this exact arrangement where I got all the good parts without any of the crushing daily weight. I want you to know I love them. Really love them, not obligatory family affection love, but actual genuine love that didn't need to be earned or maintained through performance. These kids didn't cause what happened. They were innocent in all of it. And that's what made everything so much harder. My sister is 34. She became a single mother 6 years ago when her marriage collapsed after less than 4 years. Her husband, the children's father, turned out to be exactly the person several people tried to warn her about before the wedding. He was charming in short doses and irresponsible in long ones. He had the children and then retreated from the financial obligations of having the children, drifting in and out of contact, contributing sporadically, eventually contributing almost nothing. She kept working. She kept the apartment. She kept raising them, largely alone, on a retail manager's salary that was steady but not generous. I want to be clear, that is genuinely hard. Single parenting is brutal. Being stretched financially with 2 growing kids while carrying all the domestic weight alone, I'm not dismissing that. She has made real sacrifices. She has shown up every day for those children in ways their father never did. None of that is in dispute. What's in dispute is whether her sacrifices become my obligations. I'm 28. I took a different path than my sister, not a morally superior one, just a different one. I didn't get married in my early 20s. I didn't have children. I spent my mid-20s working, saving aggressively, living frugally in ways that were sometimes actively unpleasant. I cooked almost everything at home. I drove a car for 6 years past when I wanted to replace it. I went to fewer concerts, fewer vacations, fewer restaurants than most of my friends. I set aside 30% of every paycheck with a discipline that occasionally felt like punishment. At 26, I bought a 1-bedroom apartment. $142,000. Small, decent neighborhood, mine. Not inherited. Not gifted. Mine. The apartment is modest. I want to be honest about this because my sister sometimes describes it as though I'm living in a penthouse. It's 900 square feet. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that fits exactly 2 people if neither of them needs to move. But it has a door with my name on the lease, a mortgage with my name on the payment history, and it represents every choice I made while watching everyone else make different ones. My sister married at 24. I was studying and working. She had her first child at 26. I was saving for a down payment. She divorced at 28. I was closing on an apartment. We were the same age during those years. We made different choices. We arrived at different places. That's not a moral verdict on either of us, it's just a description of what happened. Only one of us ended up with an apartment, though. And my sister had decided that was a problem I needed to fix. Part 1. How it started and how it escalated. The early comments were easy to dismiss because they came wrapped in something that sounded like light-hearted observation. Must be nice having your own place. You're so lucky you don't have anyone depending on you. I wish I had the space you have. I ignored the implications. People vent about their circumstances without necessarily demanding you fix them. I told myself she was just tired, just having a hard week, just doing what people do when they're stretched thin and someone nearby seems comfortable. I didn't take it as a blueprint. Then the request started, modest at first. Could the kids stay with me more often? Of course, I loved having them. Could I help with rent this month? I did, twice. Could I co-sign a lease application for a larger apartment? I hesitated here, because co-signing meant liability, but I started researching whether it was feasible. I was still in the mode of how can I help rather than where is this going. Then she invited me to dinner at her apartment. This was unusual. My sister typically avoids having me over. I think seeing my apartment and then returning to hers creates a comparison she finds painful, which I understand. But she invited me specifically, just the two of us, on a Tuesday evening when the kids were at a friend's sleepover. She had wine open when I arrived. She had clearly rehearsed. We sat down. She said she wanted to talk about something important. About my apartment and the children's future. My stomach understood what was happening before my brain caught up. I want you to transfer your apartment to me. She said it plainly, like she was proposing something reasonable. The kids needed space. They needed stability. A real home, not a rental. I was one person in a one-bedroom apartment that was half empty. She was two growing children in a two-bedroom that was completely full. By any fair calculation, she argued, their needs were greater than mine. I could rent a studio. I could stay with friends temporarily. I could move back with our parents while I saved for something smaller. The sacrifice would be temporary. Children's childhoods were not. I sat with this for a moment. I actually sat with it, gave it the consideration she clearly believed it deserved. And then I started to speak. I saved for 6 years for this apartment, I said. I made specific choices for 6 years to be able to buy it. I can't just transfer it because you need more space. She had anticipated this. Sacrifice, she said, and her voice had an edge that surprised me with its sharpness. You sacrificed lattes and vacations. I sacrifice every single day for my children. You have no idea what real sacrifice looks like. You chose to be comfortable. I chose to give life. Those aren't equal choices. She waited for that to land. I thought about it. I still think about it. There's something in there that sounds almost right, like it's on the border of an actual argument. She has given more of herself daily than I have. Parenting is relentless in ways that frugal saving is not. But her framework assumed that the type of sacrifice determined who deserved the outcome of someone else's sacrifice. That my discipline was merely comfort-seeking, while her parenthood was genuine self-giving, and therefore my property should flow toward her greater moral weight. That's not a principle. That's just a claim that her choices were more important than mine, dressed up as ethics. She deployed the children next, which I had been dreading. Don't you love them? She asked. They ask about your apartment. They wonder why Uncle has a nice place and they share a tiny room. How do you explain that you have space and won't share it with them? And here is where I want to be careful, because this is the part that actually hurt. Not the unfairness of the demand, I had already processed that. But the use of my niece and nephew as leverage. She wasn't wrong that they wondered. She wasn't wrong that they deserved better circumstances. The children were real, and their situation was real, and I genuinely wished it were different. But their circumstances weren't created by my apartment. And solving their circumstances wasn't as simple as transferring a deed. I didn't sleep well that night. Part 2. The family and the pressure. Within a week, my parents knew her version of events. My mother called me, careful and sad. Your sister is struggling. The kids need stability. Can't you find a way to help more? My father was less diplomatic. Maybe you could let them move in with you? Or you could take her apartment and she could take yours. He said it like he was proposing a practical solution rather than asking me to downgrade my property so his daughter could upgrade hers. I explained, as calmly as I could, that this wasn't a fair ask. I had bought my apartment. It was mine. Asking me to give it away, or to trade it for her rental, wasn't helping, it was taking. My mother sighed. My father looked uncomfortable. Neither of them pushed back directly, but neither of them told my sister she was being unreasonable either. The family pressure wasn't aggressive, it was ambient, the low-level hum of everyone around you implying that you're the problem because you're the one who has something. I started examining the situation more carefully, because I needed to understand what I was actually dealing with. My sister's financial picture was tight, that part was true. But it wasn't purely the result of having children she couldn't support alone. She had a car with monthly payments, in a city with decent public transit. Her kids wore name-brand clothes when generic would have served the same purpose. She had a premium phone plan. These weren't extravagances exactly, but they weren't nothing either. She had told me repeatedly that she couldn't save, that there was nothing left at the end of each month. But the nothing at the end of the month coexisted with choices that weren't necessity. I'm not saying she was lying about being stretched. I'm saying that I can't afford to save, and I can't give up these specific things, don't both get to be true simultaneously while she asks me to give up my apartment. I asked, carefully, about the children's father. About child support. About whether enforcement had been pursued, wage garnishment, legal action, the tools that actually exist for exactly the situation. She was evasive. He was useless, she said. You couldn't get blood from a stone. It was too complicated. He'd just disappear again. She has energy, I thought, to construct a months-long campaign to acquire my apartment. She does not have energy to pursue the man who actually owes her children support. It's easier to guilt the brother than to enforce the father. I held on to that observation without saying it, because saying it would have ended the conversation in a way that resolved nothing. She had energy to demand my apartment, but not to pursue the man who actually owes her children. Easier to guilt the brother than to enforce the father. I tried one more time to offer something genuine. I laid it out plainly. I would contribute $200 a month to a dedicated housing fund for her and the kids. I would pay for a session with a financial advisor, a real one, not a pamphlet. I would help her model a 3 to 4 year plan to save for a down payment of her own. I had run the numbers. It was realistic. It would require changes, but it was achievable. She rejected it without consideration. I don't need budgeting advice, she said. I need the apartment. You have one. I don't. It's that simple. And there it was. The offer of help, the genuine, substantial, forward-looking offer, was rejected because it required her to change something. The apartment required only me to sacrifice. She knew which was easier. I offered help, monthly contributions, financial advice, a housing fund. She wanted only the apartment. Because help required her to change. The apartment required only me to sacrifice. She knew which was easier. Part 3. The conversation I needed to have. I asked her to come over to my apartment specifically because I wanted to have the conversation on ground that was honest about what we were actually discussing. She came on a Saturday afternoon. The kids weren't with her. I had thought carefully about what I wanted to say. Not a speech, not an attack, just clarity. I'm not giving you this apartment, I said. And I want to explain why, not as an argument, but because I think you deserve a real answer. She was quiet. She had been expecting either capitulation or defensiveness, and I was offering neither. You made choices, I said. Choices I understood at the time, choices I didn't judge. Marrying when you did, having kids when you did, the husband you chose. Those were your choices to make. I made different ones. I didn't marry. I didn't have kids. I saved instead. Different paths. Different outcomes. I'm not saying my path was better. I'm saying it was mine, and the result of it is mine. She started to say something about the children. The kids deserve better circumstances, I said. I genuinely believe that. They didn't choose any of this. But what they need isn't my apartment. They need their mother to build something stable for them, and I will help you do that in every reasonable way I can. What they don't need is for me to hand you a property and become homeless while you figure out whether you've changed anything fundamental. You're punishing them, she said. The anger was quiet now, which was somehow worse. You're punishing them because I got divorced. Because their father is a deadbeat. No, I said. I'm protecting what I built. Those aren't the same thing. She asked me what kind of uncle I was. The kind who babysits, brings presents, pays for school trips. The kind who won't transfer his apartment to fix his sister's financial decisions. Those aren't contradictory, they're boundaries. I asked you something, I said, before she could leave. If I give you this apartment, what changes? You have more space. But do you save better? Budget better? Plan better? Or in 2 years is there another crisis, another thing I'm supposed to give up? She didn't answer. Not because she was being cruel, I think she genuinely didn't know. And that silence told me everything I needed to know about whether the apartment would actually fix anything. She has 2 kids. I have 1 apartment. In her math, children automatically outweigh property. But I worked 6 years for that apartment. She worked 9 months for each child. Both required sacrifice. Only one of us expected the other to fund the outcome. Update 1. 1 month after the conversation. She stopped speaking to me almost immediately after. Not dramatically, no final confrontation, no door slamming, just silence, carefully maintained. Calls unreturned. Texts read and not answered. Then I heard from my mother that she had told the kids something. Not the whole story, not the complicated adult version, just a simplified, terrible summary. Uncle doesn't want to help us. I learned this from my niece, indirectly. She texted me a few weeks after. She has my number, has had it since she was 7, and wanted to be able to send me photos of things she found interesting, and the text said, "Mom said you're busy." I read that text in my kitchen standing up and felt something settle into a cold weight in my stomach. She wasn't asking for an explanation. She was 8 years old. She was just reporting what she'd been told, in the careful way children report things they half understand and half suspect might not be the whole truth. But it meant my sister had used her. Had used a child's genuine attachment to me as a pressure point, a punishment, a message. She told the kids, "Uncle doesn't want to help," poisoning the one relationship I had with them that wasn't about money. That's what this cost me, not just the conflict with sister, but the innocent trust of children who now think I abandoned them. She weaponized her own kids against me. And calls me selfish. I texted back, "Not busy. Just give me a call whenever you want." She called that afternoon. We talked for 20 minutes about her school project on ocean animals and a disagreement she'd had with her best friend and a book she was reading. She didn't mention the apartment. She didn't mention her mother. She was 8 years old having a normal conversation with her uncle, and by the end of it I had to sit down because I was so relieved and so sad at the same time. My nephew didn't call. He's 5, he's too young to navigate the phone independently, and his access to me goes through his mother. That hurt in a specific way I didn't know how to process. Update 2, 3 months in. The family pressure had reached a kind of steady hum. My mother checked in weekly with a particular worried tone she reserves for situations she doesn't know how to fix. My father had stopped suggesting I trade apartments. I think someone finally explained to him that what he was proposing was me voluntarily downgrading my own property to rent my sister's lease, which even he couldn't entirely defend once he sat with it, but he still had a look on his face when he saw me, a look that asked the question without asking it. Extended family had opinions. An aunt called to mention, gently, that family should support each other. A cousin sent a long message about how children needed stability. None of them knew the full picture. They knew my sister had 2 kids and I had an apartment and she'd asked and I'd said no. That was enough for a verdict. I went to a family dinner that felt like walking through a field of mines. My sister was there with the kids. She couldn't avoid all family events, and I think she calculated that showing up with the children would apply its own kind of pressure. My niece ran to hug me when she saw me, unself-consciously, the way kids do before they learn to be careful. My nephew looked at me from across the room, uncertain, and I crouched down and waved, and he came over slowly and then climbed into my lap like nothing had happened, because for him, maybe, nothing had. My sister watched all of this from across the room with an expression I couldn't entirely read. I stayed for 2 hours. I ate the food and made small talk and helped my nephew with a puzzle and read my niece a chapter of whatever book she'd brought. I did not discuss the apartment with anyone. I left before the tension crystallized into something someone would have to say out loud. In the car on the way home, I thought about what my sister had said in our last real conversation. "You chose to be comfortable. I chose to give life." As if those were the only 2 categories, comfort-seeking and self-giving, and as if having children automatically elevated you into the second one regardless of how you'd planned for them or what choices you'd made along the way. She said, "You chose to be comfortable, I chose to give life." As if choosing to have children you can't afford is morally superior to choosing to build stability before taking on dependence. Different choices. Different consequences. Not my job to equalize them. I got home. I locked my door. I sat in my apartment, my small, modest, mine apartment, and I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and sad and certain, all 3 at once. Update 3, 6 months in. Something shifted around month 5, or maybe I just stopped waiting for it to shift back. My sister and I had reached a kind of armed neutrality. We spoke at family events, carefully, about nothing that mattered. She had stopped the active campaign. I think she understood that it wasn't working, that I wasn't going to change my mind, that the social pressure she'd assembled wasn't actually going to compel me to sign over a deed. The war had moved from siege to occupation. The cost was just the ongoing damage to what we'd been before this started. I paid for my nephew's preschool photos when I heard she'd had to skip them due to a tight month, not because she asked, but because my mother mentioned it and I called the school directly and handled it. I paid for my niece's class trip to the Science Museum, $50, no fanfare. These were the ways I could help without surrendering my stability, and I kept doing them because the help was real even when the relationship was strained. My sister didn't thank me for either of these things. My mother told me she had noticed, though, and I decided that was enough. I had also done something that felt important even though it happened quietly. I put together the housing fund I'd proposed, opened a savings account, set up an automatic transfer. $200 a month, my sister's name attached as intended beneficiary, accumulating toward what I'd calculated could be a down payment in roughly 4 years if matched even partially by her own savings. I told my mother about it. I asked my mother to tell my sister, because I couldn't tell her directly without it becoming an argument. I don't know if my sister set up matching contributions. I don't know if she acknowledged it at all. But the money is there, building slowly, for a future where she decides she wants to build something rather than take it. I thought about the children's father again, about child support, about enforcement, about the legal mechanisms that exist precisely for situations like this. I mentioned it, once, to my mother, gently, suggested she raise it with my sister, not as criticism but as an unexplored option. My mother said she'd mentioned it once and my sister had shut the conversation down. Too complicated. Too much history. I kept thinking about that. He owed those children something real. The legal infrastructure to pursue it existed. My sister had more claim on his obligation than she had on my generosity, and yet it was my apartment on the table and not his wages. The kids deserve better. They didn't choose their parents' divorce or their father's absence. But they also didn't choose their mother's spending habits. She can't afford to save but can afford those. My apartment won't fix that math. Update 4, 10 months in. I babysat them both on a Thursday evening in month 10. My sister had a work function she couldn't skip, a mandatory dinner for her entire management team, and our parents weren't available, and she called me with a particular tightness in her voice that comes from needing something from someone you're currently not speaking to honestly. I said yes without hesitation. I picked them up from her apartment. I stood in the hallway while she got them ready, not invited in, which was fine. She had their overnight bags packed. She gave me the list of bedtimes and medications and dietary notes with the clipped efficiency of someone conducting a handoff, not a conversation. Then she was gone. I took them to get pizza. My nephew ate 4 slices and was deeply proud of himself. My niece told me about a book series she discovered and explained the entire plot of the first 3 books in exhaustive detail while I listened and asked questions and ordered a second round of garlic bread. We watched a movie back at my apartment, the 3 of us on the couch, my niece falling asleep about halfway through, my nephew making it to the credits before going limp against my shoulder. I carried them both to my bedroom, the only bed, and slept on the couch myself. In the morning my niece made me a drawing of the 3 of us at the pizza place. She drew me with orange hair again. My sister picked them up at 10. She stood at the door. She almost said something. I watched the impulse move across her face, and then it didn't happen. She gathered the kids, got their bags, kissed them both on the head. At the door she paused. "They're good kids," I said. "I know," she said. That was all. But it was something. It wasn't resolution, we were still far from that, but it was a moment where we were both just people who loved the same children, which felt cleaner than anything we'd been in months. Update 5. 1 year after. 1 year. My sister is still in her rental. Still stretched, still working, still managing. The situation hasn't transformed. There's been no windfall, no sudden rescue, no discovery that solving the underlying issues was actually easy. She's just living with them, the way most people live with their circumstances, imperfectly, incrementally, 1 month at a time. I'm still in my apartment. 1 year of mortgage payments made. 1 year of the apartment being, provably and continually, mine. The relationship between us is not what it was. It's probably not going to be what it was. That's a real loss, and I hold it without pretending it isn't one. The version of us that existed before this happened was something I valued. I miss it. But that version required me not to have understood what she was willing to do to get what she wanted, and I understand it now, and understanding things changes them permanently. The kids are fine. They're kids. They adapt to their circumstances with a resilience that adults tend to underestimate. My niece texts me regularly. Photos, voice memos, descriptions of books, updates on her friendships. She sent me a photo last week of a drawing she'd done at school. The assignment was my family. She'd drawn her mother, her brother, her grandparents, and off to the right, slightly separate from the main group but clearly included, deliberately labeled, Uncle. I looked at that for a long time. She drew my hair orange again. Resolution. What the year taught me. I have run her argument through my head hundreds of times over this year, looking for the version of it that holds up. The version where she's right and I'm wrong. The version where there was something I should have seen differently. Here's what I keep coming back to. She isn't wrong that children need stability. She isn't wrong that her situation is harder than mine. She isn't wrong that the kids deserve better than what they have. Every one of those things is true. What's wrong is the step that follows, that because those things are true, my apartment should become hers. The children's need for stability doesn't generate a claim on my property. Their need is real. The source of the solution is misidentified. They need their mother to build stability, through budgeting, through pursuing child support, through making different choices than the ones that got them here. My apartment in their mother's name doesn't solve any of that. It just relocates the problem by one generation while removing the one stable thing I've built. She wanted me to fix her situation without requiring her to change her situation. The apartment was a transfer of consequences, her consequences moving to my ledger, not a solution to the underlying problem. I could see that clearly, even when it was painful to say it. I asked about child support enforcement. She said it was too complicated. She had energy to demand my apartment, but not to pursue the man who actually owes her children. Easier to guilt the brother than to enforce the father. I look around my apartment on Saturday mornings sometimes, the particular quality of weekend quiet that I've come to understand as a privilege, the light coming in at an angle I know well now, the orange-haired drawing still on my refrigerator, and I try to locate something like peace with all of this. Not satisfaction. Not victory. Just the quiet, honest acknowledgement that I did what I could. I helped where I could. I refused where I couldn't. I stayed in the children's lives despite the interference. I kept the housing fund running. I paid for the school trips and the class photos and the babysitting nights when she needed them. I held the boundary without holding a grudge, or I tried to, on the days it was possible. There's a version of this story where I'm the villain, the bachelor who kept his apartment while his sister and her children struggled, who chose his property over his family. I understand how that story gets told. My sister tells it, probably. Some relatives believe it. There's another version, which is the one I've lived. A person who built something through discipline and sacrifice was asked to give it away by someone who wanted the outcome without having made the choices, offered genuine alternatives that were rejected because they required change, and held a line that needed to be held. Both versions are told about the same events. Only one of them is true. My sister wanted my apartment because she has children and I don't. In her equation, kids automatically trump property. My 6 years of saving meant less than her 9 months of pregnancy. My discipline meant less than her decisions. My apartment should become her apartment because her needs were greater and her sacrifices more visible. But here's what she doesn't count. I sacrificed too. I sacrificed dating, vacations, nice cars, eating out, everything she kept doing while claiming poverty. I built the apartment while she built debt. Now she wants my result without having made my choices. I said no. I offered help, money, time, planning assistance. She wanted only the apartment. Because the apartment would solve everything without requiring her to change anything. That's not help, that's a transfer of consequences. I love my niece and nephew. I'll keep showing up for them despite their mother's interference. But I won't show up homeless because I gave away my home. They need stability, yes. They don't need my stability transferred to their mother. That wouldn't fix their situation. It would just destroy mine and delay hers. The apartment stays mine. The love stays real. And someday, when they're adults, maybe they'll understand. Their uncle helped in every way he could except the one way that would have ruined him. That's not selfishness. That's the difference between support and surrender. Saturday morning. My apartment is quiet. On my refrigerator there's a drawing of me eating ice cream with orange hair, taped up crookedly the way an 8-year-old tapes things. My phone shows a message from this morning, a photo of another drawing. My family. Me, off to the right, labeled in careful second-grade handwriting. She still includes me. Despite everything her mother has said. Despite the months of distance and the changed access and the simplified, painful story she was told. She still draws me into her family portrait and colors my hair wrong on purpose because she knows it makes me laugh. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what holding a line actually buys you. Not a clean win, not a healed relationship, not the story you wanted. Just a photo texted on a Saturday morning. Just orange hair. Just the fact that you're still in the picture, still included, still someone's uncle even when you're not someone's solution. The apartment is mine. The love is real. The boundary holds. And somewhere in the distance, a housing fund accumulates quietly, $200 a month, building toward a future where my sister decides she wants to build something instead of take it. I don't know if she'll use it. I don't know if she'll ever acknowledge it. But it's there, and it was always there, and that's the difference between refusing to help and refusing to surrender. I am not the villain in my niece's drawing. I'm just off to the side, orange-haired, still in the picture. That's enough. That has to be enough. And most days, more days than not, it genuinely is.